Hello. Lewis freely tells us that he was given to sins of intellectual pride. In Mere Christianity, he gives us a whole chapter on pride. It was his besetting sin, he told his friend Arthur Greeves. I catch myself posturing before the mirror, so to speak, all day long, he said. He says that Arthur's vision of homeliness, his joy in the humble, cosy, ordinary stuff of life, I talked about this a bit last week in the video on Lewis the Domestic Man, this came as a vital spiritual lesson for Lewis. And soon after he became a Christian, he wrote to Arthur explaining how he found this concept of homeliness helped him find something lovable in other people, even if it's only an oddity, he said. And thereby, without patronising, he could attain the virtue of Christian charity. In his famous sermon, The Weight of Glory, he said, our merriment must be of the kind, and it is in fact the merriest kind, that exists between people who have from the outset taken each other seriously. No flippancy, no superiority, no presumption. Lewis particularly disliked flippancy. In the Screwtape letters, it's the only kind of humour that Devil Screwtape really approves of. There's a video on that too. No flippancy, no superiority, no presumption. Also in the Screwtape letters, the devil recommends his understudy Wormwood to encourage snobbery in his patient when that person starts to go to church after becoming a Christian. And there he encounters the local grocer with rather an oily expression on his face, bustling up to offer him a hymn book. Or when he gets to his pew and looks round him, he sees just that selection of his neighbours whom he's hitherto avoided. The Screwtape says, your patient, thanks to our Father below, is a fool, provided that any of those neighbours sing out of tune, or have boots that squeak, or double chins, or odd clothes. The patient will quite easily believe that their religion must therefore be somehow ridiculous, and he'll think that he's showing great humility and condescension in going to church with these smug, commonplace neighbours at all. Thinking they're smug, you see, when that's exactly what he is himself. So in the Narnia Chronicles, Lewis elevates characters like the humble beavers, like the child Lucy, so many of them, and the wonderful London cabbie Frank and his wife Helen that I'll come to in a bit. There's no room for snobbery or its companion self-conceit, however lowly and unheroic creatures are, like, for instance, Hwin and Bree, the horses in The Horse and His Boy. Pride is under the microscope, particularly in The Horse and His Boy, in which the two horses, Bree and Hwin, journey towards freedom in Narnia. It's there in Aravis, a rather superior girl from Calaman. It's there in the endearing but conceited Bree. Bree's so concerned with appearances. He's so very keen not to look foolish or cowardly or bedraggled, all of which, at different times, he is. He's so vain about his tail, which has to be cut back to disguise his pedigree as a warhorse when they're trying to pass through the city of Tashban unnoticed. He eventually becomes disgusted with his own cowardice, or rather he fears that other Narnian horses will be disgusted if they hear about it. He'd as soon go back to slavery than not create a good impression. He's still not learned his lesson at the end when he's worried that what Narnian horses will think of him rolling on the grass. Oh, they won't care 2 lumps of sugar about that, Hwin, the other horse, assures him. But all the same, he plods on gloomily, hanging his head, thinking about it as they go on northwards. You've lost nothing but your self-conceit, the hermit of the Southern March upbraids him and spells out the moral lesson for us all. You're not quite the great horse you'd come to think from living among poor dumb horses. As long as you know you're nobody very special, you'll be a very decent sort of horse on the whole. Hwin, the other horse, is much more sensible, so mild and unassuming. She is without guile, shy, humble, always deferring to others, although it's usually she who's right. Shaking in her hoofs when Aslan comes to them in the hermit's cloisters, she swallows her fear and is the first to go to him. And her courage is a vivid contrast to Bree's terrified dash across the enclosure when he realises the lion is behind him. Dearest daughter, said Aslan, planting a lion's kiss on her twitching velvet nose, I knew you would not be long in coming to me. joy shall be yours. Hwyn is one of the long line of honest, humble, homely folk in Narnia. Before I come to Frank and Helen, I'll just dip into that Hideous Strength, the third of Lewis's space trilogy. The kitchen at the manor in that story is full of homeliness. Our first sight of it is through the character Jane's eyes, and it includes a large open fire, Mother Dimble, the wife of an academic, preparing vegetables, Ivy Maggs, the housemaid whose husband's in prison, and she's often fussing and scolding, a bit like Mrs. Beaver, and Camilla, wife of another academic at the university, working over a stove, and McPhee coming in from the gardening and taking his boots off for a cup of tea and a slab of cake. We already sense it's a warm, homely, friendly place, a bit like a farmhouse kitchen. Jane is surprised at the democracy of the household, that Ivy Maggs, who brings her tea, should talk to McPhee in the same tone that she uses for Mr. Bultitude, the brown bear, who shuffles tamely about the manor. And she's surprised that Mrs. Dimble should always be known as Mother Dimble. You'll find us in the kitchen, I expect, Mother Dimble and me and the rest. And there are no servants here, said Mother Dimble. We all do the work. The cheery, homely kitchen is a counterpoise to the blue room upstairs with the robed director Ransom on his dais, almost as though it's a throne room with all its solemnity and grandeur and its celestial visitants. There are no servants here. We all do the work. There's plenty of merriment, but no flippancy, no superiority, no presumption. I said last week that landscapes are sometimes homely too, with that English village and country feeling. Well, on the trip to the village of Cure Hardy in chapter 4 in that Hideous Strength, we're told how lovely Jane's husband Mark finds his surroundings, including the many little things that Arthur Greaves would have called homely. The bumpy lane, the brown fields, the old man shuffling across the courtyard of the almshouses to fill a kettle. You remember how Lewis loves his kettles. The aged woman with her fat old dog chatting to the postman. Mark finds that her resemblance to Aunt Jilly of his childhood did make him understand how it was possible to like that kind of person, which is a direct application of Lewis's idea that the concept of homeliness helped him find something lovable in others, even if it's only an oddity. Then there's the pub. In the Two Bells it was very warm and dark, for the window was small. 2 labourers were sitting with earthenware mugs at their elbows, munching very thick sandwiches. Mark's colleague, Cosser, won't drink any beer, which is a black mark from Lewis, of course, and he doesn't want to hang around this cosy place. He'd demolish the pub without a thought. No sunlight, no ventilation. And he's at odds with every comment that Mark makes, showing his pleasure in the cosy little village. Mark experiences a nostalgia in the pub that borders on Sehnsucht, that joyous longing which Lewis's biography, Surprised by Joy, is all about. The whole scene was reminding him of drinks and talks long ago, of laughter and arguments in undergraduate days. And he realises that Cotter is a complete bore. The sheer homeliness of the village is awakening the first traces of a love of beauty in him. I'll finish with a quick look at Frank, the London cabbie, and his wife Helen. Frank is a brave and kind man from his first appearance in The Magician's Nephew, a humble character as far removed from Lewis's own state of life as you could imagine. When the intimidating witch Jadis threatens to bring mayhem to the streets of London, if not death and darkness too, the self-styled Queen of Queens and Terror of Charn, he advises her to have a cup of tea and a lie down. Of all the party present at the creation of Narnia, Frank is the most attuned to the loveliness of Aslan's singing. I'd have been a better man all my life if I'd known that there were things like this, he says. He knows the goodness, the beauty, the miracle of it. Hold your noise, everyone, he says. I want to listen to the music. Frank comes originally from the country, and like Diggory, he hates London. He's been demeaned, his soul crushed by the harsh city life. But the humble cabbie is to become the first king of Narnia. Cabbie King Frank, you could say, is in the tradition of the shepherd king David and the carpenter king Jesus even. His wife Helen is called across the worlds into Narnia, and when she appears, we're told she has an honest, kind face, wearing her kitchen apron, her sleeves rolled up for wash day, and hands covered in soap suds. Homely or what? She gives a little curtsy to Aslan and looks round shyly. Aslan tells them that they're to be the first king and queen of Narnia, to rule and name all these creatures and do justice among them and protect them from their enemies when enemies arise. It would seem to be like the role of an Adam and Eve in paradise, naming and ruling the animals. Frank responds, "Thanking you very much, I'm sure," which my missus does the same, "but I ain't no sort of a chap for a job like that. I never had much education, you see." But a brief conversation reveals he has all the sincerity and the courage, the steadiness, the kindness, the humility, which makes him fit for the job. He's not afraid of work. He'll be a good father, kind and fair, no favourites, brave and honourable, and ready to do his bit. So God lifts up the lowly, Mary herself says. In The Weight of Glory, Lewis says it's a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you can talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship. And he calls on us to remember this in all our dealings with other people. They may quite possibly have that weight of glory waiting over them. It's in this context, this sermon, that he said, no flippancy, no superiority, no presumption. In Narnia, Frank and Helen flourish as they never could before. When we see them again in the last battle, they're seated on thrones at the foot of the tree at the centre of the garden in the inner Narnia, the phoenix above them, and they're so great and so beautiful that everyone bowed down before them, and Tyrion felt as you'd feel if you were brought before Adam and Eve in all their glory. So God lifts up the lowly.